As you know, when you're building a website in Webflow, it's incredibly important to have a rock solid structure, not only for ease of management, but also for scalability. And personally, I tried several different style guides and structures which are going to enable you to do just that. But my favorite so far has been Clients First from ThemeSuite, which is a guideline and series of systems which are going to enable you to create Webflow sites which are flexible and also very easy to expand and manage. So in this video, I'm going to give you a high-level overview of how this style guide and system works, and so that by the end you can have a great understanding and you can kickstart your journey with this system. So let's get started. Now we're going to focus mainly on Client First by ThemeSuite, since it became the most popular system out there, and it's structured in a way which allows a ton of flexibility and generating a clean output while still maintaining a high level of flexibility. So this is actually going to be very easy to implement within your workflow. Simply click on the Get the Clonable, and as you can see, we have this clonable that we want to essentially clone. So we're going to do just that, and I'm going to simply leave this site name. And at this point, Webflow is going to load this clonable within our workspace. And as you're going to notice, we now have the client first system essentially structured. So you're going to notice that under the pages, you're not going to find any pages. So this is not a template. This is not a list of several components in a page, but it is going to come with a style guide, which is going to be your main point of reference. Now, on this style guide, you're going to find all sorts of predefined elements, components, classes, which are going to help you level up your design workflow in no time. And we're going to explore the basics of how this style system works. And we're going to go and really have a first on approach with this overall. Now, one thing that you're going to notice is that the moment that you start looking at design systems and style systems in particular, you're going to find many of them. Now, I'm not particularly subscribed to client first. You can totally use also other type of style systems. In fact, I want to mention some of the most popular ones, which is Wizardry as well, which again, it's another style guide, which I haven't personally used, but I do have friends of mine who have used it in the past, and they had a positive impression overall. The main reason why we're going with client first is because personally I have a lot of experience. It's the most popular, and also while looking at job postings, it's the one that I've seen the most request in the marketplace. Plus, FinSuite is a very big name in the Webflow industry. So, taking the time to learn the style system is definitely a great ROI. We're going to start exploring the client first quick guide. So starting from the classes, which are going to be one of the core pillar elements that you're going to utilize all the time. So as you can see here, overall, we're going to have the strategy for how to identify, use, and manage classes inside of Webflow as a platform. So starting from the utility class. A utility class is created for a specific combination of CSS properties, which can be applied to elements across the project. Now, in the client-first style system, the utility classes uses dashes only. There's going to be instances where we're going to use underscores, but that is going to come in just a moment. So for example, if a class is set for a specific element, a typographic element, it can be text size large, and you can notice these dashes which are being applied. Same in this other example, background color primary. So if we go on Webflow and we have a look at these classes, you can see that all of them are utilizing this dash. So overall, that is going to be the basic for pretty much all of the utility classes which you're going to encounter and also add yourself in client first if you wish. So let's go to the very next part, which is going to be the custom classes. Now, custom classes, as I was about to mention, is a custom class created for a specific and identifiable component, page, grouping of elements, or single elements. So these are going to utilize the underscore to define the custom class. So for example, if you have a specific header background, you can utilize a header, which is going to be the main class, and then underscore background layer. So this is not going to influence the headers as a whole, so the general class, but it's actually a specific custom class. And as they mention over here, it's better for maintaining a project as it's more flexible to changes. Avoid overstacking classes and making site-wide mistakes. So this is going to be your bread and butter really when it comes to the classes. And if we have a look down here, and by the way, you can always click on Show in Docs in order to go to the relevant selection in the client first documentation in order to learn in more detail with more examples also these scenarios and these concepts. So do keep this in mind. Now we need to talk about the global and also the combo classes. So the global class is intended for use across the entire project. So it is a further classification of the purpose of a class. So utility classes and custom classes can be global classes. And a global class can either use the dash or the underscore. So both are going to be possible. And as you can see here, we have the example header, background layer, and the FAQ item with the underscore. Now, combo classes, this is where it can get tricky, so I want you to pay attention because a combo class is a variant to a base class. So it inherits the styles from the base class and adds more styles on top of it. So for example, in this case, it's inheriting the styles of the bottom class, but on top of that, it's utilizing and adding more styles on top. And the prefix of the combo class is going to be this is and then dash. So button is dash brand or header content is dash home. So this is going to be useful for adding additional styles for a specific instance. And over here on the right, we can actually see examples and meaningful and complete naming. So they mention that class names should say what they do. And the name of a class should always answer these two questions. The first one is, what is the purpose of this class in the project? So for example, button is very clear. This is going to be a button. That is the purpose in this project. And how can I give the most context into what this class is responsible for in the project, which again is going to give that context. And if you go one step further with another example, you can see team slider. It's clearly outlining the purpose. and headshot is going to give the context as well. So overall, these are going to be good examples of how to operate with classes in Webflow. So again, they also give their own example. Give classes meaningful name, testimonial wrapper. This is a good name. I understand it very clearly. And but an abbreviation like call dash to dash D, what does that mean? Maybe column, but 2D, it's not really clear. Or flex mobile AC. Like when you see these classes in Webflow, it can get confusing real fast. So always try to keep the classes naming clean. So overall, over here, they also mention general to specific class naming convention. So in the example of text size large, we have text. This class is used to style a text element. Size. This class is used to style the size of a text element. And it's quite clear the association. And large. This class is used to make the text size large. So this is a very natural progression and it's extremely clear. And if you have a look at this other example, theme list, custom class folder name. This is the theme list component related to the theme page or a theme section, which makes sense. Headshot. This class is used for the headshot element in the theme list, which again, quite descriptive in its context. And then wrapper. This class is used for the element wrapping the headshot element. So using this naming approach to stay organized and custom classes for the theme list component are grouped in the same folder as mentioned here. So we have this example, theme list component, theme list headshot image, theme list headshot texture layer, theme list headshot background. I think that you're seeing where we're going with this. So overall, keep these elements in mind. It's going to become second nature the more that you're going to work on them and apply them in your Webflow project. So don't worry if it's not 100% clear and second nature as you're working on your Webflow projects, because the more the practice, the easier these concepts are going to get. So this is it for the general introduction to classes. Now let's move on with the very next part of the style system client first. And now we're going to review the page structure that is being used with ThemeSuite's client first structure. So first of all, you can see that after the body, of course, we have the div which is going to contain the entire page. Now this is really helpful in order to copy and paste a page throughout your Webflow project. So for example, if I didn't utilize this div, which is the main container, I would have to individually select these different items and then copy them into another page. So this is just a practice which I believe is a really good one in order to keep your workflow flexible if in the case it's going to erase and it's needed. So as you can see here, very briefly, outermost parent of all elements on the page, and again helps to copy and paste the entire page to a different page or apply CSS style to the entire page. Now moving forward, we have the navbar, which of course is going to be a staple in each and every website, since it's going to enable users to navigate through your website, and it specifies the list of navigation links. Now nav HTML tag is placed outside of the main wrapper, since its content is not for page specific content. So this is actually going into a bit more of detail. So you need to have an understanding, a basic understanding of what's going on from a HTML standpoint, since the nav is actually a tag which was introduced with HTML5, and essentially they wanted to added outside in order to not confuse the search engine and generally speaking make the entire ecosystem work well. So these are two different individual elements. Nav is going to stand by itself, and then we're going to have the page specific elements within the wrapper. Now, global styles is this component right here, which is essentially the custom CSS for the project. So it organizes all custom CSS snippets for the entire project, and it's stored in a Webflow HTML embed as a symbol. So this is essentially an embed. It's not anything that you're going to see, so it's not a visual element. It's just going to be added right here, since it's going to be fast to load at the very top. And right after that, then it comes the main website, which is going to be, first of all, wrapped into a div, which is called main wrapper. And as they mention, the main or page specific content of the page is going to be the main wrapper. So they use a main HTML tag for accessibility best practice, so that Google or any search engine also understand that this is going to be the main content. Right after that, we're going to have the section identifier, which essentially wraps an entire section of content, and again helps to organize Webflow Navigator panel, and HTML section tag is recommended. And right after that, we're going to have the padding global and the container. So padding global is essentially adjusting the horizontal spacing of the page content. So it's basically used for site-wide left and right auto padding on each page, so that the content stays well placed in the center with a bit of padding on the left and right side. So just a padding div essentially. And then we're going to have the main container, which is going to contain the actual content. So the container, it's something that we already explored in previous videos, but it essentially sets a max width for all the page content and centers the content on the page. So in client first, they actually included three types of container, or three sizes of container: the small, medium, and large. So depending on how larger you need or small you need the container to be within the web page, you can decide upon one of those three sizes. So that's that, and let's also briefly discuss the new update that happened in version 2.1. So the padding section size utility class should be used on the div block with the padding global class applied to reduce nesting elements, as example below. So this is actually going to be something that you're going to need to take note on. It's a technical thing about this 2.1 update. And if you have a look on the right, you can see more here, and you can learn more about the padding section size. So basically, this is a class that helps to manage the top and the bottom padding for sections globally throughout the project. So here we have an example where we have 5 rems on the top, 5 rems on the bottom, and you can decide, of course, the size again with small, medium, and large, which is going to be a recurring pattern throughout our journey with client first, since most of the classes that offer the size option are actually going to either be small, medium, or large. There's also some other ones which we're going to notice in future videos, but yeah, that's pretty much it. Have a look again at the documentation. You can always click on show in docs in order to see the very specific documentation around this, and really try to understand the basics for this. You're not going to have to create this from scratch each and every time. There's actually a way where you can copy and paste from their Chrome extension this exact structure so that you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Essentially, that wouldn't be a great UX, but they solved that problem for us. So try to understand what's going on from a high level, and then we're going to move on to the very next. At this point, we're going to discuss a very important section of the style guide, and that is the philosophy and the structure behind the units of measures. So, client first uses REM, and for good reasons, because it's essentially a unit which is going to help you create more flexible solutions, especially when it comes to the responsive side of things. And as you can see over here, what is a REM? The REM unit is based on one thing, HTML root font size, which by default in pretty much every browser it's at 16 pixels. Now, you apply REM to all elements in client first, including typography, spacing, width, and anything else that requires a size unit. So it's pretty much everything. And 1 rem equals exactly the font size that is set by default. So in this case, it's going to be 16 pixels. If a default HTML root font size is set at 20 pixels, then 1 rem equals 20 pixels. If it's 16, equals 16. So you see the gist of it. So the moment that you start working with multipliers, such as 2 rems, that's going to be 16 by 2, so 32 pixels. And this is essentially the gist of it. So it's going to help you basically scale up and scale down elements and utilize this root element font size. So as you can see over here, we have an entire table, which I highly recommend you to have a look at so that you can understand with some practical examples. So again, 16 pixels, as I mentioned, is going to be 1 rem. If you start utilizing 1.25 rems, that's going to be 20 pixels, 1.5 rems, 24, 2 rems, 32, so on and so forth. And of course, it works also for smaller rem values. So you can actually make the calculation straight in the style field by typing the value slash 16 rem and hit enter. So this is actually going to help you uh, not having to do all the calculation each and every single time that you need to find the exact rem value that you're looking for. So you can do that directly inside of your Webflow builds. So say for example that I'm here and I am setting up another size for the typography. I could, for example, say 50 slash 16 and the rem value is already set. And that's going to make a total of 3.125. So you can see how this can work directly in your Webflow browser. So that's that. Pro tip, use Pixel to REM Migrator Infinite Suite extension to cover existing projects to REM. So this is actually something that is available in the extension. And we're also going to look at this fluid responsive generator in just a moment because it's actually pretty cool. So before that, let's briefly talk about the accessibility benefits of doing this. So browsers can zoom normally when a project is built in REM. So browser font size settings that are modified by end users will be respected, and the vertical width and vertical height values are not respected for full accessibility compliance. So just a note that you have to take in consideration. Now let's talk about this fluid responsive generator. So it enables you to visually scale all elements on the page as the user changes the size of the browser. So you can maintain the design and layout across the browser sizes. And you have this nice generator which is available. If you click on showing docs, you're going to see this page essentially. And if you scroll down, you're going to encounter this fluid responsive generator. And as you can see, the moment that you start modifying the root font size on the based on the breakpoint point, which you can also change. You can also add a breakpoint if you wish. You're going to essentially have the styling code right here below, updated in real time. So pretty cool and pretty useful in some specific instances. And yeah, that's that. Now let's briefly talk about the very next point, and that's going to be the minimal stacking strategy. So again, when it comes to classes and the stacking, less is more. So you always want to be mindful about these type of combo and stacking strategies. So in essence, you want to build a maintainable project and avoid deep stacking classes. Now, what are deep stacking classes? You're going to learn that in just a moment. So, as you can see over here, they have one or two classes. So, if we just added text size medium and text color secondary, that's actually pretty good, very sustainable. One or two classes is amazing. If you add a third class, it's okay. If you could avoid it somehow, that's even better. Fourth class, they say avoid. And fifth class, do not. Just like that is starting to get really tricky. And you're going to notice that it's not really a specific instance that is going to make or break the flexibility of your site, but and also your mental sanity. But if you start adding many classes in many elements throughout many pages of your website, that is really when things can get tricky, and managing your website is simply going to be very difficult and incredibly complicated. So you want to keep a minimum viable approach. And as you can see here, we have also some good insights as to how can I avoid deep stacking. So first of all, using one single custom class. For example, here they made an example where we have a text which I want it to be size medium. I want a secondary color. I want a light weight to it, and also an italic style. So you could actually merge this all inside a combo class and just call it text style alternative. Maybe add it in the main style sheet and adding some, or in the mail style guide, and add some notes on top of it so that people understand what this textile alternative is all about. And this is especially going to be useful if you're going to work with other team members on your website. And yeah, you can merge everything into a combo class. You can use the theme suite extension to merge classes as well. And overall, again, less is more. So create combo class with required styles. This is also another approach. You can simply have the FAQ item and then the is dark class, which in this case it's for merge. It essentially merges its stacked classes to a combo class. So again, there isn't like a specific rule in each and every scenario. You're going to have to do your own logic and math if you wish, and figure out what is going to be the best solution. But keep in mind this high level idea and objective overall. And also another thing, nesting another div block. So it can be useful for avoiding stacked utility classes. So uh, it's an option. You might want to be mindful with that, but you can definitely also add another div within a div. So in this case, text color secondary class, and then we have a max with large. Not too sure about what they're specifically intending right here. I get the general gist of nesting into another div block. So really going to depend on your specific scenario. So this is recommended when stacking utility classes of different types like typography and max width, which does make sense. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this for this section. So let's move on to the very next one. At this point, let's talk about typography, which is going to be a fundamental element within the client-first system. So first of all, we're going to discuss the headings, since these are going to be the color pillar of your website in terms of typography. So first of all, we're going to notice that although we do have the basic global style already, we are actually going to have some heading classes which are going to essentially help us whenever we need to override the H1. So even if we look at the original version, you can see that over here under the headings, we have the H1, which again, it's just the classic H1 with no tag. And right below that, we have this variation, which has the class applied heading style H1. Now, in this example, you can see that they note use the correct HTML heading tag based on the headings hierarchy on the page. Use heading style classes. So basically these ones right here. Only to override the default heading tag style. So if the H1 on the page should be styled like an H1, don't apply any class to it. So if you just need the H1 as it is, just use the H1 with no global styles and or actually with no applied styles. And if the H1 should be styled like an H3, for example, you can use a heading style class. So for example, H1 heading style H3. So if I do just that by selecting the H1 and then I use heading style H3, you can see that we still have an H1. So like the core heading hasn't changed, but the styling applied is like the one of an H3. So this is going to be useful in some specific scenarios, and it's not going to be maybe something that you're going to use all of the time, but it's definitely something that gives you flexibility in your Webflow builds when it comes to headings, because sometimes you do want to keep the H1 at the very top of a page, and that is going to be the title, essentially the core title of the page. But maybe you don't want the visuals to be as big and prominent as the original H1. So that is a perfect case where you can utilize the heading styles. And the same is going to be true also for other headings. So I could actually have a H2 look like an H1, for example, or as an H4. So sky's the limit in terms of the interchangeability of this flow. Now, moving forward to the next step, which this one is actually basic SEO heading hierarchy. So you should always nest the H1s all the way to the H6 in a way that it creates a hierarchy. So in this case, we have H1, which is nested within an H2, which contains an H3, and the H3 contains an H4. Then we have another group of H2, but you can see how these are on the same line. Essentially, it's like two separate groups, and the H2 contains the H3. Now, what you don't want to do is to have, for example, an H1 that contains an H2, which contains an H4. Here, we should have an H3 because it's just a natural consequence, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's not 1, 2, 4. Same is true also over here, H2, 5, and then we have this H3 below. So you need to keep this in mind. This is just basic SEO concepts, really. So that's that. And then moving forward, we have to talk about the text size classes. So as you can see over here, the text size classes to change the size of a text element. So for example, over here we have a few different classes which we have by default in client first. They go from large, medium, regular, small, and tiny. The regular is essentially at 1 rem, so this shouldn't really change what you currently have. When it comes to the other ones, then we have increments of 1.25, 1.5 rem, and the small is 0.85 and 0.75 rem. So you can easily change the text style. For example, if I select this element and we currently have it at text size medium, but what if I write text size small? You can see how now it's applied 0.875 in this case. And if you go text size, oops, large, you can see how now we have it at 1.5 rem. So these are just handy classes that you can easily add in order to achieve the text size in a short amount of time, maintaining a level of consistency throughout the project. And the very next property is going to be the text color. Now, as you can see, we have three type of colors: primary, secondary, and neutral. Neutral is usually going to be something around the lines of gray or something that you set as a neutral color. Primary is going to be 000 by default, secondary FFF. Now, of course, you can change these based on the specific of your Webflow project, but if we have a look, text color, you can see how we can find these directly here. Now, this is set as the primary color, as you can see. But if you go ahead and then edit this value, you can actually basically change the variable. So we're going to go ahead and talk about variables later on, but that is essentially the link which is created and where you can easily change this option. Now moving forward to the next part, we have the text weight. These are really useful because they allow you to add different sizes of weight to your typography. So again, you're going to need to set this up based on the font family that you're using in your project. And it's also important to note that not each and every font family is going to have this many different weights. Most of the more flexible and comprehensive ones will, but you're going to need to keep this in mind. So if you want a lighter font weight, you're going to go with font weight light. And if you want something more bold, you're going to go towards these classes right here. So very fast, just to give you an idea, what we're gonna do is we're going to select here text weight. We're going to go with semi-bold. As you can see, these are going to be really easy to adjust and add. Now, the very next one is going to be text alignment, which again should be fairly straightforward. You can text align left, which is the default, text align center or right. So if I need to just add the text align center real quick, you can see how now I added this combo class in order to achieve just that result. So fairly straightforward. The very next one is going to be the text utility classes. Now, these are going to be more specific, and these are utility classes to help maintain the global system in on point for the project. So, for example, when you need to truncate the text into 2 lines, 3 lines, these are going to be the classes for you. If you need all caps, that's going to be the one that, and italic, strike through, muted, which is simply puts the opacity at 70% essentially. So these are going to be very handy at times. You need a quick class to make it all collapse. You have it. And yeah, it's just going to be something that you want to keep in mind. You're not going to use them all the time, but just a nice have in your options on the table. And also, one note, stack typography classes. You can create unique yet global combinations of typography styles. Just in this case, we have the text color, which is set as blue, with a semi-bold weight of the font family. And also one thing which is quite important, avoid stacking non-typography classes with typography classes. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind. And I would add, do not add too many of these typography classes into stacks because it's really easy to start actually going ahead and adding a class for size, color, weight, maybe even alignment. But at that point, you're going to have to make a decision as to what is going to be the best way to go after this. And can I create simply a class that kind of like reunites all of this? Or maybe I change a basic heading or paragraph style, or I create a unique one. So you can always add on top of what is already here. Like for example, we have paragraphs. Nothing wrong with creating more paragraph styles if the project needs that, and it's going to be something that is going to be beneficial for you. And moving forward, custom typography classes. So create a custom class if the typography instance is very unique, requires deep stacking, or is better managed outside of the utility system. So exactly what I just mentioned. I didn't even realize there was a section dedicated to it. So yeah, that's exactly what we just mentioned. And there is this nice feature. So you can merge classes to a custom class by utilizing the Theme Suite extension to merge classes. So definitely something to keep in mind with their Chrome extension. And overall, avoid creating too many custom classes for typography. However, it is allowed to improve maintainability of the project. Example of custom classes: footer, copyright text, footer link, hero subtitle, theme user description. So that's exactly what I was referring to. You can, whenever you start finding yourself having two or more classes, especially when you get to the point of three, I would say definitely keep this in mind. So we're going to continue with the very next. We're going to talk about the spacing utility classes, which are essentially going to help us when it comes to spacing, both when it comes to the padding and also margins. So first of all, let's go ahead and talk about the first utility class, which is going to be the spacing wrapper. Now, the wrapper is essentially going to be composed of two padding elements. So we have the first one, which is going to declare the direction of this element. So for example, if I set padding top, this refers to having padding on the top of the section. And then we're going to have the sizing class, which is going to establish the amount of padding that we are going to specifically have in that very section. So in this, if we mix padding top small, we're going to have some small padding applied at the very top. And if we apply padding bottom, medium, we're going to have medium padding applied at the bottom. Let's do an example of this. So what we're going to do is we're going to add some padding, let's say over here. I'm going to write in padding bottom, and I'm going to add padding huge. And as you can see, now we have this padding applied, which is 6 rem. Now, if I go back and examine the various versions that we have available, you can notice that we have padding top, padding right, padding bottom, padding left. This should be pretty self-explanatory. It's one of these. But then we have padding vertical and padding horizontal. Now, what these two classes mean is that we're going to have padding equally set at the top and at the bottom for the vertical. And in case of the horizontal is left and right. So let's do an example of this. Going to write padding vertical, and I'm going to write again padding huge. As you can see, now we have padding on the top and at the bottom. And if we set it to horizontal, we would have the same padding set at 6 rem here and 6 rem on the right side. So now that we understand the basics of this section or classes, we can actually apply the same also to the margin. So it's going to be exactly the same as you can see here. The only difference is that instead of padding, you're going to write margin. So you can see that we can do margin vertical, and then going to write margin huge. And instead of the padding, which is on the inside as a refresher, we're going to have the margin set at 6 rem on both top and bottom of this element. Now, these are going to be the exact values in rem for each and every one of these classes. So I highly recommend you to check it out. So spacer small, it's going to be 1, and the same is going to be true for padding small. And then we are going to have increments, as you can see here, in minus or in plus. Now, the spacing block is essentially going to be a spacer divider. So if I go ahead, for example, and create a div right here. So I'm going to simply add a div, and I'm going to add the spacer, let's say XX large. You can see how we have this element set up as a spacer, and I can simply utilize this spacer as a wish throughout my project for various different reasons. If I just need to create some space in between elements or even sections. So these are going to be all the spacers which you have available, and then custom, of course, you can create your own custom spacing. Now, when it comes to the content sections, you can see here that it helps to manage top and bottom padding for sections globally throughout the project. If we go and add this padding section, and then we specify the size. So if you have a section that we need padding which is larger, I'm simply going to do a quick example over here. This is related to the sections again. So, let's go over here. Let's create this section, and you can see how I can actually apply the padding section larger, and this is going to essentially add the 8 rems top and bottom to this section and give it a basic style. So this is going to be specific for the sections. For all the other elements, utility classes for the spacing wrapper and spacing block. Now, another important thing to keep in mind is to create custom class to an element when it requires unique spacing that is not covered in the utility system. We're going to essentially utilize this practice. So has unique space, margin bottom 0.75 rem. So the benefit of doing that is that the global spacing updates for the recurring element. It can include more styles, so it helps to avoid combo classes and overstacking, and it's easy to maintain without affecting utility classes. So that's another thing to keep in mind overall. Now, they also have some guides as to the spacing strategy. So first one is going to be the spacing blocks. So this is going to essentially, and the way it works is you add block between elements to add spacing. So again, what we discussed just a moment ago with and showed live with .div. You can set the spacer class with a size. Wrappers, you can add content inside the div block with spacing utility classes, which again, something that we discussed. And then you can add content inside wrapper with grid or flex styles applied. So also here we seen how you can easily add these elements and divs to a grid in order to create some specific visual outcome. Then over here, this is going to be the actual application of these concepts. So you can see how this could work in a real life scenario. You can have these spacer divs essentially. And also over here, you can create the different padding and create specific layouts. And as well, for this element, we're going to have these grids. This is not as often used in this specific scenario, but definitely something to keep in mind. Here, you can see how that looks within the navigator. So we have individual spacers, divs, or we have divs containing elements that we then apply one of these classes. Or again, we simply have the grid, which is going to contain all of it. So start experimenting with spacing. And one of the main reasons why you want to adhere to this specific philosophy of or strategy around spacing is to maintain a level of consistency throughout your project, which is really going to show in the details. Plus, it's going to be so much easier to maintain rather than creating unique classes for spacing or simply attributing specific margin or padding to individual one-off elements. So very efficient, very easy to use. And now we're going to move on to the very next. We're going to learn about other utility classes which are going to be available within your Webflow project using Client First. So the very first one is related to the buttons. So buttons, we have the regular button, which is simply going to be this basic class. And we have also the ability to create a secondary and even potentially third and other type of special buttons using the IS secondary class. So if we have a look again at Webflow, you can see that we have the regular button, which is this one right here. And then when the IS small class is applied, you can see that we have a smaller version of this button. Now we also have the IS large and the IS secondary. So basically this is for the sizing. This is going to be for the secondary buttons. And of course you can create more styling. So you can always go ahead and add to the basic styling and expand as much as you can, as you want, actually, the style guide, which you have here at your disposal. And this is going to be quite easy to apply. There is also a pro tip: add style flex or grid with gap to a button with label and icon. And one very useful class which I highly recommend you to keep in mind is the button group, because a lot of the times you're going to have situations where you have maybe a primary button and then a secondary call to action, which is going to need to be on the same line. And they have this button group, which is going to come in real handy. So as you can see, if I create a duplicate of this button, we now, if we check on the navigator, we have these two buttons. But if I go ahead and create a div, which I'm going to add here, and we are simply going to drag and drop these two buttons over here, and perhaps I could apply to the second button a is secondary. So we have this variation. Now, if I go ahead and write in, now if I go ahead and again select the block and I write in button group, you can see that now we have this Flexbox group applied, and we have this nice distancing between one button and the other. So just a very quick and nice way to create button groups. And another utility which is quite useful is the ones regarding the icons. So you can set the height size, which is going to be either small, medium, or large for the icons. And you can also set the height and the width. So this one is going to essentially tell us both of these values, and you can see here the RAM values applied. So I'm not sure that there is an icon section within client first, but or actually there is. So you can actually see the different icons sizes which you can set up directly from here. We have icon height small, icon height medium, which is a bit bigger, large, and then we have these variations with 1x1 small, medium, or large. So those are going to be useful in some specific scenarios where you're going to use icons. And now let's talk about another set of utility classes which are going to come in handy from time to time. The first one being the hide element. So there's going to be instances where whenever you're creating a responsive version of your maybe a specific section, or you're dealing with a specific image or element that you don't want it to view that size either in all of the sizes, or in just the tablet or the mobile landscape or the mobile portrait. So for example, if I go ahead and select this class and I add it to this text, useful utility systems, hide mobile portrait, you can see that we're going to basically visualize it. If I can find it again over here on tablet, on mobile landscape, it's going to be this very same thing. But if we go on mobile portrait, you're not going to see it any longer. So this is a very fast way to basically add some responsive indications to any element in your Webflow project. Then we have the overflow feature, which this one is going to be fairly straightforward. If you had a look at the video where we discussed the overflow, you can essentially quickly set the overflow hidden, scroll, auto, or align center directly by utilizing a class. You can also change the background color. Again, this one should be pretty self-explanatory. Highly recommend you to simply set up the primary and secondary colors, and also the dark according to your brand guidelines, and you should be good. And then we also have, very similarly to what we saw with some of the previous classes, you can set the limit width of an element, and specifically the max or the minimum width. So you can select and apply these values very quickly. So please have a look at it, and you're going to be able to do that very easily. You can also turn on the mouse events on the element, or turn off the mouse events on that very specific element. And you can also set a z-index, which is going to be helpful whenever you're going to deal with multiple elements. You need to give a visual hierarchy, almost like layers in Photoshop, to tell which one comes first and which one is comes afterwards. You can also align center, which real fast is essentially going to apply a CSS property of margin and zero auto. And you can also dictate the layer and display inline flags. Now, I'm highly recommending you to check out also this section, which very briefly, global styles, it's going to be a component that is going to be applied and must be applied in every single page in the project. So whenever you create actually using the boilerplate template of client first, you're going to have a global style applied to that. And you can also learn more about all this in the documentation. So again, we went through quite in detail regarding the quick guide, but if you want to learn more in detail with maybe more example about any specific section in this guide, feel free to have a look at their documentation because it's always going to be the most up-to-date resource in order to find anything related to client first. So really excited about the journey ahead. So let's continue with the next video.